to Ampliz webinar 4, and today I have with me a very, very special guest. I think Saurabh has definitely been in the business for a long time to see the experiences that nobody has actually ever seen in terms of starting his own business, doing a lot of growth activities. So thank you, Saurabh, for taking the time and effort to being a part of this the learning community, because Ampliz truly believes in learning, and something that I personally believe as well, to constantly learn and grow. And thank you for being a part of this community, for telling us new things about your experiences and something that we can take away with. So thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you, Ashwini, for inviting me. I actively look forward to kind of contribute to the community in terms of whatever learnings and personal experiences I can share. And as usual, at any point, if whatever I've said, if somebody couldn't get that, they can drop in a question. I'll be more than happy to reach out to them and clarify things. So yeah, looking forward to this session.
Absolutely. Okay. So for people who couldn't make it to the session, we'll definitely record this and put it up on YouTube channel, official Ampliz channel, because everybody has to have an access to it. And in case if they have any questions, they can revert back to me or you directly and get the questions clarified. Okay. So thank you. So let me start off. Before I wanted to directly move to the questions, I want to ask you, the first question is, how did you actually start off with your professional journey? What kind of led one to the other? What was the first thing that led to the second and third and so forth? What has been your experience so far?
Correct. So, I mean, in some ways, I kind of started in college. While I was still in college, I got into building the fest team for our college from scratch, which was like in some ways my first entrepreneurial experience. I had to create the infrastructure, get the people on board, and so on. That was my first tries with entrepreneurship in some ways. Kind of moved from college to a consulting firm called Corporate Executive Coach, which later got acquired by Gartner. Worked there for about 6 months, and it kind of hit me that, I can stay here for another year and get a promotion. My learning curve was no longer steep. And without actually having a job in hand, I kind of jumped to the other side. I'm like, all right, we're probably not going to do a job 9 to 5. And I was very young. This is like 21, 22, and, just wanted to live it and so on. Yeah. Did that, was between these gigs, and I was spending some time at home. There was some renovation going at my place, and my dad kept pestering me about, like, calling an electrician, a plumber, and whatnot. And after a point, I was like, this is very inefficient. There must be a better way to kind of do this, the scheduling and, payments and all of this. That kind of led to me starting to talk to a few electricians and plumbers. And then I kind of also realized their side of the problem, which is they are very unorganized. They have no health insurance. There's no protection net. So for example, if you're sick, you take a work from home, they can't. And so I thought there is a problem that exists on both sides. On the customer side, that there is a discovery problem, that who's a good electrician, or is a good problem, and the payment split. And on the plumber side, there is, of course, the assurity and repetition of work, right? Usually what happens that they will operate in one small area, and say if for 1 week, sadly for them, if none of these houses had any problems, they will have no income. But being on my system, that led to, okay, you're in Koramangala, there's no job in Koramangala, but there's one in Ejipura, so you'll probably go jump the Ejipura, the job that wouldn't have come to him earlier. So started solving this problem, raised the seed round at the idea level, found a couple of co-founders, tech co-founders, did it the wrong way in a way, built an app and a website. We were primarily doing the business even before the app and the website, from using OLX and Quicker, and putting posts that, hey, if you need an electrician in Koramangala, you call on this number. Started putting out posters. This led to us, like, serving about roughly 40,000 unique customers. We were in 2 cities, Gurgaon and Bangalore. We were pretty much bootstrapped apart from that seed round. We were operationally profitable, but suddenly the market became over-competitive. And the cost of acquiring a customer, which used to be, say, 40 rupees, and my average margin from that customer was, say, 250 rupees, eventually flipped. And my average margins pretty much stays the same or became lower. And because, and now my cost of acquisition went up to as much as 300. So every time I actually booked an order, I was making a loss. So then I was in touch with a couple of VCs and a couple of firms who were trying to acquire us. primarily in acqui-hire rather than anything else, and decided that don't really want to run a loss-making company. So that is the end of 2015. Shut it was a very difficult decision to take, So yeah, did that. Then kind of very difficult decision, telling everyone that, hey, we're shutting it down. We're not selling it. We're not taking 50 lakhs and becoming rich. We would rather shut it down and so on, because nobody wanted to kind of commit for another 3 years to a loss-making business, even in an AQI, right? With the vesting and stuff coming in the picture.
Yeah.
So we called it off. Had what I would call was some level of a founder's depression. Then suddenly I've lost the purpose of my life. I was sleeping, eating, breathing, solidify all the time, just thinking about all the ways that I could grow the company or run the company and so on. And suddenly there was a vacuum. Took me a bit of time, but thankfully the failure was a very public failure. And there are a lot of people in the ecosystem who kind of recognize that, at least I gave it a shot and I tried, and they saw it around.
Yeah.
So that led to a lot of people kind of wanting me to join as a co-founder.
Okay.
And that led to a series of offers. And yet I was not ready to kind of, jump ships and become another co-founder and another idea that, I don't strongly believe in. I've from the very beginning of times, I've thought about entrepreneurship is something that you really think you need to do. And if you can't do it, nobody else can do it.
Yeah.
Right. So when I was also giving up on Solidify, it was kind of easy that I could look at someone like Abhiraj Singh Bal from Urban Clap, that he's solving the problem, or the Housewife Boys, that they're still solving the problem. So if I quit, it's fine. Right. I just didn't want to do another Me Too thing, so that's why I didn't join. But eventually, it boiled down to me starting to tell people that, hey, you know what? Maybe I can't become a co-founder, but I'll consult for you. And that led to me becoming a growth consultant and starting a consulting firm called Growth Track. And we primarily did B2C customer acquisition work, that'll be our specialization, and business strategy, and a little bit in the fundraising space, where I kind of help founders in terms of, changing the strategy, tweaking it to make it a more fundable business, more scalable business, and so on. Work with a bunch of brands like Helping Go, EdTech Firm, Batch Chef, a food tech platform. There's something called Capto, which I'm still in touch with the founders. They were a cab aggregation platform where you could book an Uber and Ola. Worked for Capto for about a year and a half, scaled up the app from like about $20,000 to $150,000. We were getting download prices on Google at something as low as ₹1.5. Tons of beta testing that went behind it. I will eventually talk about the beta testing bit when we talk about like how to go about growing marketing and for B2C. Did that. Then eventually, after a point, I moved back to Delhi. So I was doing this in Bangalore, but I had a major client in Delhi. It's a civil society called Deshka Society. And they organize something called Bodh Gaya Global Dialogues. So it's a set of dialogues that happen on sustainability, spirituality, and just environment and so on. Kind of felt very deeply about the topic, both Buddhism and spirituality and sustainability. So was associated with them for a couple of years. That also meant that I have to move back. Did that. After a point, while I was doing the side gigs with a bunch of smaller startups, it kind of put me in the headspace that I'm not really solving big problems. All these things were too obvious, and there was a huge talent problem in the market that, for doing the simpler things as well, either people were not willing to use Google to do it on your own, or they were not able to find the right people to do it for them. So eventually, most of the work that came to me, no matter how high paid it was, even if I'm getting paid like $10,000 for an hour, but you're asking me to make a campaign for you, that kind of didn't seem worth my time. So then I was looking for bigger problems, and that's when Mobisy Technologies happened. Spoke to Lalit, who's my CEO. Also, one of the primary examples of the spirit of entrepreneurship. He's been doing this for like last 15 odd years, quit a well-paying job in US, came to India, started the company, kind of failed, then found two more co-founders, and then started the company again. And in the last 7 years, he has built a brilliant company where in some ways, like right now, even as an employee, technically, I don't feel that employee perspective. I feel an entrepreneur perspective. I have that freedom to kind of take decisions, kind of come up with stuff. And, if you feel like it, run it by someone. Otherwise, as long as you can get things done. Everybody is all for you. So people are very supportive in nature that way. And hence, that's also a reason why if you're eventually going to ask me that why are you not starting something again, is that I am kind of loving what I do at Mobisy Technology as of now. Really solving the growth problem here, especially from an international business development perspective. So
Okay.
yeah, exciting times ahead.
Awesome.
This has been pretty much my professional journey. And yeah, now I can answer any follow-up questions you have.
Okay, so what is your journey with Mobisy been like? You are the assistant vice president for Mobisy. You head the growth team there. So what kind of growth activities Mobisy does, and something that's Mobisy is successful at?
Correct. So look, Mobisy, what it is really, really good at, and lately, is that our product and the market fit is pretty great, right?
Okay.
So there's a huge gap in the market where there's someone like a Salesforce that exists,
Mm-hmm.
which most emerging market companies can't afford. Even if you're doing like $1 billion in a business, you can't afford solution from Salesforce because the ticket size will be so high. So
Yeah.
that's where someone like Mobisy comes in the picture. And also the fact that we have something like an inch wide and mile deep kind of a philosophy. So for example, if we are in say Alcobev or CPG, our expertise of the small transactions that happen at the grassroots levels is much better than most companies out there. So our products are basically customized to make everyone's life in the ecosystem easy, be it the retailer, be it the distributor who's fulfilling these orders, or eventually the brand, right?
Okay.
Who gets the access to all this data of all the processes that are happening in terms of selling and distribution.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where we kind of have an edge over other companies. Speaking about Mobisy and my role, what the kind of things that we primarily do. So there broadly you can divide business development into hunting and farming. So both bits of it. But when it comes to hunting, so I primarily look after the international emerging markets like LATAM, Southeast Asia, and the Africas.
Okay.
The bunch of things that we do, including using digital, for example, LinkedIn sponsored content,
Okay.
white papers, and so on as a hook for people to kind of start a conversation with. We also run, we very recently started for the last couple of months running account-based marketing campaigns, which a bunch of things around, just messaging to one particular account or a set of accounts and, creating leads from that. We also have like a great amount of inbound coming. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a great sign
Yeah.
as a company that a lot of executives from different companies, they use it. And when they use Bizom, which is our product, the Mobisy product,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of realize that we are much faster in terms of implementation, the go-to market getting live. And second, our product really, really does what it says. So we are not going out there making any fake promises. We, in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, we're primarily under-promising, over-delivering in most cases.
Okay.
We make an executive's life a lot easier because he has this overall access to his business, and that kind of leads him to make much better decisions in terms of growth and so on. And we work with some fantastic clients like Parley, ID Agro, and so on. And we've been for the last 3-4 years, we've been part of their growth journey, and this has been really exciting.
Awesome. Awesome. That's really interesting to hear. Okay, so let me just shift the focus towards today's topic, the spirit of entrepreneurship. So there is this one point in your life when you feel, okay, so this is my idea to change the world. So when did you arrive at that situation? What kind of an idea? When did you think, okay, this is going to make an impact? This is what I want to start off with, because every day you come across so many ideas, so many different perspectives, so many ideas, and so many new thoughts. So how do you drill down to that one thing that you really want to take it forward and make it into a business?
Correct. So there are different elements to it. Like, I mean, like you said, like someone like Steve Jobs said that how do you make a dent in the universe, right?
Yeah.
And somehow, like a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the ones that I speak to, has some sort of a early childhood thing that they
Yeah.
eventually wanted to do something big. I mean, they didn't know what exactly they wanted to do, right?
Yes.
So we were like, I mean, I remember when I was like a fourth, fifth standard, and we were like listening about Bill Gates, Microsoft, and you were like the richest man in the world. I don't know how did he get there, and
Yeah.
started running a business and so on. So it always starts backwards, but as you grow up a little more, those things kind of get starting to define a little better, right? Like in my case, like I said, I was actually started with me thinking about a problem that I had, that, hey, how do I manage all these vendors at the same time for my own home? And then I realized this is a common problem for a lot of people, right?
True.
Then I spoke to these vendors as well, and at the same time, a lot of potential customers. And I asked them that, how do you do it right now? And how tedious is exercising, right? Someone like Kunal Shah says that a product should have a Delta 4. Delta 4 is basically, will you tell another person to use it in some ways or not? So I thought this does, right? And the time when I started it, which is basically mid of 2014, there were not really any companies that were doing it.
Okay.
But if you look at the end of 2014, there were suddenly 50 companies. Yeah. So there's a surprising element there. But at that point, so I kind of researched, I looked, does something like this exist? I'm like, okay, you can order food online, you can order XYZ things online, but you can't, call an electrician or plumber. And then you kind of start thinking about why nobody is doing it yet, right? Then you think about things like standardization. Okay, if an electrician comes to someone's house, stabs someone, like what happens then? Whose liability it is, right? How do you verify someone, right? And is verification enough? Does their liability end? Right? Forget the legal liability, but there's an element around moral liability. I forget, like legally I was right, but if something stupid happened, right? And India has a huge problem, like, women's safety and all that. Like, how comfortable would a woman be ordering a plumber from a website that they don't know about, right? How does this person behave inside their home, right? Because they're inviting. So these kind of things. And I realized that actually that's the problem that's worth solving, right? All these problems that I'm asking myself, these questions that why is it safe? Is it all that? So I was like, okay, this is what we really need to work on. Started working on that. The idea in a lot of ways was why entrepreneurship was a mix of things. Of course, I wouldn't deny that somewhere back in the mind, there was always that romanticizing that idea of entrepreneurship that, I'm going to be my own boss, I'm going to be super rich someday and all of that, like whatnot. But like as soon as you hit the ground running, right, you realize that, fuck, now I have hundreds of bosses.
Yeah.
So I am basically reporting to everyone all the time, right? And then you realize that after paying everyone, I'm hardly left with any money, or I'll never be left with any money eventually. So all these ideas go out of the window very immediately. And they're also a very good test that are you made for this or not? And after these two things have gone out and you still think that you really want to solve it, I think that's something worth pursuing. In my case, it was. Okay. Like where I really thought that I could solve this problem. And none of these factors were determining factors. Also, I would put it out there that I'm privileged in some ways, that I come from a decent family background. And, I was working in a consulting firm. So my worst case scenario was going back to a 6-7 lakhs a year kind of a job, right, at 21. So to me, that taking that risk was much easier. But to be very honest, I was not considering these things. I'm saying this in hindsight. But at that point, I had no consideration that I would find a job. I was not even thinking like that. And to most good entrepreneurs, I think they never really have a plan B until the plan A has absolutely failed. Like, I mean, everyone keeps telling you that have a plan B, have a plan B. But what I see a lot of great entrepreneurs is that they never had a plan B to begin with. I mean, everybody improvises, you pivot your company. Like at the end, we also pivoted from B2C to B2B contracts, right? We started doing unlimited electrician for restaurants for, 10,000 a month. Right? You do those kind of things, but nobody kind of sticks to like that hardship. Like, I mean, you change and you move on and you grow and so on. So that's the first stint of entrepreneurship, and that's how I got
think
there.
Definitely that proverb, you say necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's totally true. Once you have that necessity, then it becomes an innovation. So yeah, definitely, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so then you might have faced a lot of adversities, a lot of self-doubt, because you need to validate the idea before the world does. So at that point of time, I'm sure you would have faced a lot of self-doubts. How did you overcome that, and how did you, actually step into the next zone?
Correct. I mean, sure, there was a bit of self-doubt, and that will come every once in a while when, things are not going the exact right way, or say you have 3 bad days in a row while you're running your company, that whatever the things that you wanted to get done in those 3 days haven't happened. And that you suddenly think that, am I even capable of pulling this off? But in general, usually most of the times it's like up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
In my case, it was mostly up.
Okay.
The way it kind of I mitigated the self-doubt bit is primarily from the factor that I logically thought through things, right? Everything that I went around doing, there was a structure to it. I discussed it with a bunch of people. I kind of ran it across. It was not just my ideas. So I might be the one coming up with a great idea, but I was validating it with 10 equally great people, like
Okay.
one way or the other. So they might not be directly involved with startups, but these are some really intelligent people in different walks of life, right? Who have, at least if nothing, they have experience of being a customer. So, right. So when I will tell them that, will you prefer to pay it in advance or will you prefer to pay once the service is done? These kind of things, a lot of people will have great inputs on, right? And what works and what not. And again, the self-doubt bit, it does happen. You have, what happens is that as an entrepreneur, you have to wear hundreds of hats, right? And while you might be great at wearing, say, the three hats, say, in my case, it would be strategy, marketing, and in some ways ops. That I might be great at that, but I'm, say, mediocre or horrible at HR. I don't know what a great hire from a good hire from a bad hire, right? So when I screw up at that hiring bit, that self-doubt is going to emerge, right? And that's going to be like, but that's why you have to realize that you did it because you didn't have anybody else around to do it for you. And a lot of things you eventually just learn from making those mistakes. So when you have made a mistake and there's a negative outcome that is there with you, you can either let it create more self-doubt, or you can basically kind of root cause analysis this and, see like what were the things that could have gone right and what things that actually went wrong, and, try to do it better from the next time onwards.
Yeah. So you've had a fair experiences of both good and bad. How did you actually deal with those bad experiences? Because good, of course, you take that feather on your hat. But how do you deal with the bad experiences as an entrepreneur? Every entrepreneur goes through that bad phase in life, and how did you deal with it?
Correct. I mean, drinking, drinking some beer. No, that's just partly kidding, not entirely kidding. It's mostly, so when you have like bad experiences, you have to realize that, you're in a bad state of mind and you have to give yourself a break. So you need to step out of that startup headspace and, go spend some time with either your parents or your, significant other, if you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, or your friends that who you basically just don't talk any sense with, right? Go watch a movie, like grab a beer or whatnot, right? A bunch of things, but take a break from that headspace. So sometimes it's very necessary to recognize that I am in this vicious cycle, and the only way I get out of this is that I leave it for some time. I know there's a problem that exists, but panicking isn't going to solve it. And me really being anxious about it and hundreds of thoughts. Perhaps what I can do is like, let me sleep over this, or let me go out and get a drink over this. I will not talk about it. I'll keep it back in my mind. I'll have a good time. I'll come back and I'll look at it again. Because a lot of times what happens is that we run out of perspectives while solving a problem. The structures that you have in your head on how you look at things, they are limited, right? A lot of times you run out of those permutations and combinations, and then you suddenly like, oh, this is a roadblock, and I don't know how to think about it. So in those cases, what you really need is a different perspective. Perhaps get a friend involved. Perhaps tell your mother, like call your mother and say like, Mom, this is what I've been trying to do. If nothing, she will hear you out and you'll come up with a solution in your head while you're speaking to her. So something like that, right? So so that's how I dealt with bad experiences.
True. I think that's really interesting. Tell us about building a startup in India, because that's what we're all looking out for. How what is how should I go about building a startup in India, considering all the situations that we are in at this point of time?
Correct. At this point of time, so there are like a lot of things happening right now, including things like the coronavirus going all around. Also, like our economy is not entirely doing well. Consumption in some ways have gone down, so not really. Like from a macro factor perspective, not really a great time to start up. But that's the great thing about startups is that macros don't really matter. Right? And that's a lot of that is just vanity. People will tell you these things that, external environment is not that great. I mean, of course, no, you can't negate things like a virus spreading and all that, but primarily from, consumption and economics perspective, because even with all that happening, you go out, take a look on a Friday, on a weekend at a bar, and the number of people who be out drinking or spending money. Consumption hasn't gone down for at least certain set of people.
True.
Now, you could build something for them, for example, or you could build something where you create so much value for the people who can't. So even this problem that people are not consuming enough is a problem worth solving.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where someone like a money tap or a lazy pay will come in picture. In some ways, they are asking you to increase your consumption, that, go above your salary, use this credit limit. That's what a credit card does. And so, from a broader environment perspective, the things that are really good is like investments. Stories like Flipkart, Ola, Oyo, Paytm, they have inspired tons and tons of entrepreneurs to go ahead and start doing something. Like, for example, when I started in 2014, there were hardly examples apart from Sachin and Bani Bansal and so on. And all the other people who were there are doing great things, you never heard of them as much, right? Today, Kunal Shah is pretty much a celebrity among the youth, right? People like look up to Sachin Bansal and Bani.
They were gods of capitalism. And that's brilliant, right? Like understanding that, hey, it's possible for everyone to kind of go out there and, live the world and, put their own dent in the universe. So that aspirations were, I suppose, were always there. If you hung out in a IIT Delhi or a IIT Bombay, a lot of times back in the day, you would found people cribbing about that, hey, I want to do something, but the infrastructure is not there. So I'm moving to US, doing my master's, and I'll start my company there. Right? And eventually masters led them to getting to a job and never doing it, right? A lot of dreams died. Now, when, say, you're in IIT Delhi, you come up with an idea, there are tons of incubators which are just out there just to talk to you and maybe fighting for you to kind of come and join. And say you're an outsider, you might as well go out and reach out to all these people and, say that this is what I'm trying to do. This is what the idea is. There are so many platforms that you can go pitch your startup ideas, kind of get them validated, take feedback from a lot of experienced entrepreneurs and investors.
Yeah.
And forget all of that. You can bootstrap in a country like India. It's much cheaper to do business in a country like India. Like, for example, Internshala, for that matter, was completely built on interns. Okay. And if I'm not wrong, a lot of them were unpaid interns. So in India, if you're really smart about like how you're scaling things up, and I'm not talking about screwing people over, it's that you could have unpaid interns to begin with, and then eventually when you raise your round, you can give them ESOPs and things like that. It doesn't always have to be that story that you had an unpaid intern and then you said bye with a certificate. Right? You can always come back and do better for them. Right? I've had people who work for me. I never had an unpaid intern, but I've had people who have worked for me, and later also in life, I could do something more for them. Right? As long as founders have that attitude, they can get a lot of value extracted from people. And what I personally realized is that if you ask nicely and you're just a kind, compassionate person, a lot of people are willing to help you. Right? I can very openly tell you that any great executive that you can think of in Indian ecosystem, if you just manage to write an email to them, you're most likely going to get a response. And if you don't get the response in the first couple of times and you give up, that's up to you. He doesn't have time, but whenever he sees it, he's going to do it. So most people are willing to kind of help. That is a great perspective. And the idea is that now there are way too many people who can help, right? For example, if I wanted to understand something about growth, I could reach out to you, right? In a particular area. If I wanted to understand something like, hey, how I want to conduct webinars, right? There could be a business who is primarily just around doing webinars. So then you're a person that could be reached out to and asked like, hey, what's your experience? What are the goes, no goes? What are the pros and cons in the current systems that you use? And I could build a solution to you. So same way, I think those things are really great. Also talent, I suppose now we are in a much, much better state than we used to be. You'll find what has changed in the last 10 years, I would suppose, is that earlier back in the day when a civil engineer used to become a IT engineer, software engineer, that was because he got an Infosys job and he had to learn the coding and all that. Now you'll find a civil engineer becomes a software engineer because he wanted to build an app and that's why he wanted to learn coding and he's done it. So his motivation to learn a skill is much higher than just money, right? And that's creates to a lot better pool of, just one example, right?
Yeah.
People are much more informed. Talent is willing to understand the risks and rewards of startups. So earlier back in the day, a lot of great people wouldn't join a startup, right? And I still have some friends who like middle of their career, like 8-9 years down the line. And if I tell them, there's a startup, they'll probably pay you 1.5x. And they'll be like, no, it's a startup. I don't know about the stability, right?
Yeah.
And yet there are hundreds of thousands of kids that come out every year for whom this is hygiene. This is all there is. They are not looking for the job security that the generation before us taught us to look for, right? And a lot of people before us did. So that kind of creates a great amount of people willing to take those chances with you. I think one other important thing, and I've said this before also, the kind of to rule the whole world, you just need one follower. So you get one guy who's completely convinced of your idea. Now it's his job to convince other people. True. You've done your part, right? Yeah. And that's where great talent kind of comes in. You find 4 or 5 of those guys. And in some ways, the growing of your company is now automated. It's automated manually, but you've created 5 different mini-me's of yourself who are trying to imitate the same task, maybe at lower efficiency and whatnot. Yes. But it's happening, right? So yeah, that's that.
Okay. So once you have a decent amount coming in, so there is some money coming in through some funding or through some accelerators or something of that sort. Now the next step is, the most important to any business is marketing. So if I'm a new and a budding business, how do I go about creating a marketing strategy to set everything in place?
Correct. So there's some very, very simple frameworks that you could think of when it comes to starting up and thinking about your marketing. Something which is called as Pirate Matrix, which is AARRR. Yeah. And that's primarily about, awareness, acquisition, retention, revenue, and repeat. Revenue, retention, and repeat. It's essentially that, right? So you could primarily divide your whole marketing funnel in these bits, and you could look at things like, at first level, you need to make 1,000 people aware of your product, right?
Yeah.
And the second level, which is the level of, say, activation, right? So you need for them to perform a particular action, which is maybe just coming on your website. That's activation. The third bit of is acquisition, which is, they eventually make a purchase, and once they have made a purchase, they are now a customer, right? So these are simpler bits of it, and somehow you'll find that most startups or people who start a company, they're able to kind of think about this bit of things, the awareness, activation, and acquisition bit. What kind of where most people lose out on is basically they don't think about the repeat and retention.
Yeah, true.
Which is where primarily from where the revenue, the last bit, is generated from.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to have an existing customer order again than acquire a new customer.
New customers, true.
Because your cost of that transaction goes massively down, right? And this is the only way you increase the LTV of the customer, by getting that retention and repeat. So that's one of the most simple frameworks that you could think of. Like, you think about like every time you reach down to 1,000 people, how many people are actually activated, how many people you actually end up selling to, how many of those people actually come back and order for you, how many of those people are still with you after, say, 9 months or 6 months or a year, right? And eventually, what is the revenue that you're generating? So that's one simpler way to look at it from a matrix perspective, because it also involves the ROI perspective.
Yeah.
So you always know that for reaching out at this awareness level, for 1,000 people are spending 50,000 rupees. If my revenue is anything less than 50,000, this is not worth doing, or at least is not worth doing in this moment, right? So that's how one of those frameworks you could think about. Other primarily is the same thing in different words, is that you have to look at
primarily like the word of mouth thing, right? I think that's one thing that most of us marketers ignore a lot, because we have all this money and tools at our hand, and we've all become all fancy with our Facebook ads and Google PPC and so on. We forget that eventually none of this matters in comparison to, so example, if I'm standing in front of a restaurant, right, and it's very highly promoted and all of it, and I've seen great reviews about it, and suddenly my friend goes, no, fuck this, we're going to the restaurant in front of it. We always end up going to the restaurant in front of it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how powerful word of mouth is.
Yeah.
And that word of mouth, the only real hack for word of mouth is great customer service. You gotta tell people that you're always there for them. Like you will do anything. For example, this one time when this plumber, like he reached someone's place at 7 in the evening to do a plumbing job. He was working till 3 at the night. And I stayed up with these people trying to make sure, okay, everything is safe. I reached outside their house and all of that. And these people were really impressed that I did that. And they went around getting me like so many customers, right?
Okay.
I was doing it just for my sake of, this transaction happening well. But then when I looked at it in hindsight, the primarily was that, for them, this was a great customer experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I go to a Taj or I go to a Park hotel and I will tell other friends to go and stay there. It's primarily from the fact that I have a great experience there.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out that how do you get your word of mouth going? That's another thing that I would point out. Another major thing that a lot of people seem to be missing out, that there is this thing called network effect, right? Which is, say you and I and another friend of ours, we use a particular product. And a fourth friend, when he wants to use that product, his chances of using it is, so his utility of that product is slightly higher because 3 people already use it. And it keeps increasing. So for example, Facebook, at 10,000 people, you can only make, say, 1 million connections. At 100,000, those connections become 1 billion connections. So your utility out of a Facebook goes much higher. So you have to say something critical in that is, there's something called as critical mass, right? This is X number of users where afterwards, if you're a great product solving a real problem, you will become viral and you will have a certain set of users and nobody can stop you from getting there. Your speed could be different. Your way of reaching the market could be different, but the size of the market will still be the same for you once you hit a critical mass. Small B2C startups, say in a particular city like Bangalore, that critical mass will be roughly around 3,000 users. So if you can get 3,000 good users to use a product and say recommend it to even one person, you're good to go. Because from there, you have a referral scheme going on where people can share using your app and both the people can kind of get some benefit out of it. So from there, it doesn't stop. Until the point that you reach that, where that repetition comes in the place, where the same person is getting the same referral messages from 3-4 people. That's where it has reached its length. But otherwise, 3,000 to 5,000 users who are really happy with what you're doing is ideally a good critical mass for a city like Bangalore. And nobody ideally can stop you from there if the rest of your business model is sorted.
Absolutely. I think even in Ampliz, we kind of follow a similar model where we, focus on the first 5,000 subscribers that you've got. And, once they start using a product, once we make them use the product and get the hang of it, and then they will talk about the tool with many other people whom we actually never thought of reaching out. So, definitely word of mouth is, very, it's not kind of taken into account too much nowadays, and something that everybody should be focusing on. So that's really interesting part. Okay, so a lot of these days I'm hearing a lot about these growth hacks. What is your take on the growth hacks? And it's like this. So marketing is what the traditional way is, and it is a combination of everything. It could be social, it could be organic, it could be referral. All of these combined together. And there's something that's called growth hacks, which is going to give you a temporary solutions, a temporary result. So how do you look at growth hacks, and what is your take on growth hacks?
Correct. So of course the word has been overused and overabused in a lot of ways, and there's no exact clarity in terms of what a growth hacker is supposed to be doing or not. But if you kind of trace it back to SF, where he kind of started, it primarily comes from tech boys kind of taking over growth as a problem. So somebody who was a very well-spoken engineer who understood people well, he decided that, okay, I can study marketing as well, and I can use the scalability that comes from tech to, increase the speed at which we acquire customers. Right?
Okay.
If you look at it, if there's a larger concept called blitzscaling, which is you scale things at a very high speed. There's a book by Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn founder, and if you ever get the time to read it. Blitzscaling is about, figuring out something that perhaps work 80% and then spreading it across the globe as fast as you can, rather than making it 100%. Right?
Okay.
In some ways, growth hack is a subset of that. Is what you do is you see there is a certain feature working in your product. Right? You take that feature as a USP and you try to reach out to as many people as you can, and you try to get them to use it. Right?
Yeah.
And there are multiple ways that people can go around doing growth hacks. It could be viral videos. It could be you hacking public spaces, you getting attention in multiple ways, like anything that basically could be a customer acquisition channel can be a channel for growth hacking. Now, where growth hacking is sort of different from traditional marketing is that it also involves you actively tracking a lot of data, and most of your data is what is deciding what you're doing next. So you're not like blindly shooting things on a wall and thinking, something sticks. What you're doing is you're actively A/B testing or even ABC testing a lot of things, right? You're running 3 different kind of things with certain constants with 3 different groups. You see those results and you see that, for example, a typical growth hacker, when he will look at a PPC ad, his approach in comparison to a marketer. So a marketer will think about a great copy. A marketer will think about a great looking graphic, right? A marketer will think about the call to action, and that's generally what marketers are trained to think about. So basically a growth marketer will do is like he's going to put 3 copies with 3 graphics and, with 3 set of customers slightly tweaking it. And he's going to measure all these things. And he's going to see like, okay, here's the click-through rate in this. Here's my cost of acquiring here in this. At this level, can I scale this up? So he's going to be a little scientific about it. Marketers in general are a little more intuitive, and they will talk to you about like 7 P's and whatnot, which is all great. And it's amazing. Like, I mean, their perspective is very important. Growth hackers a lot more, they only trust in data. For everything else, they will go to God. They not so much so like from an intuition perspective. They like, okay, I need to see this data that kind of validates my hypothesis for me to put in more money or, go full power scaling this up. That's what a growth hacker will do. In Indian scenario, I would say apart from, of course, there are very few people that are there. And of course, there are great companies like Uber and Cred and whatnot. And there are a lot of intelligent people working in Swiggy, Zomatos and all that. But in general, there's a dire lack of growth hackers. A lot of time you'll find that anybody who's saying that they're a growth hacker, it's not. He's either a marketer or an engineer, but he's not both. And that also gives the profession a bad name. Leads to a lot of people not calling them growth hackers. So, who should have? There are a lot of people that I know who are amazing growth hackers, but they don't call themselves growth hackers because they kind of despise the word. And so that's kind of my perspective on this.
That was a very, very different perspective. So tell us a little bit about, in the B2B space and in the B2B space, B2C space, how do I go about enabling growth because the scenarios are different, your customers are different, the way you approach them is very different. So how do I go about enabling growth in the B2B market as well as in the B2C market?
Correct. If you look at B2B or B2C, like primarily it's still a business, right? And you need customers to run a business. So a lot of fundamental exercises are pretty much the same, right? Identifying those customer personas, right? Either you're a B2B or a B2C, it's kind of going to be same level of research. But B2B, since it's like a high ticket and high consideration, your research is more thorough, you kind of dig deep. In B2C, what happens is that I'm just going to pick 5 personas. This is someone who goes to WeWork, drinks a third wave coffee, smokes Marlboro Lights, and that's one of my personas, right? In B2B, you have to be more thorough, like, okay, this is a person who takes decision for APAC for this particular technology, and these are his other 4 stakeholders who have a say in it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So B2B is a lot more about decision makers, and there is almost exclusively never one single decision maker. So that's where you start thinking of B2B very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So in that growth, B2B growth primarily is derived from that. Now you have to think of all the 5 stakeholders, and you as a product or a company, what you can individually do for all of them. It could be saving them time, it could be saving them money, or it could just making the existing thing more efficient, and hence therefore leading to growth that comes from running a more efficient business.
Yeah,
So you have
yeah.
to find those individual USPs. Now that you have in some ways that structure around it, is you see that now that maybe I know one particular cohort, let me figure out how many of these similar cohorts exist across the globe, across the industries, who I can use similar level of messaging, right? So a lot of B2B is also just outbound. You writing an email or a LinkedIn connect or just making a cold call, and you're saying that, hey, I saw your profile. I thought this is what you do. This is what we do. And this is how I think I can possibly help you, which will lead you to doing this XYZ things in the future, helping you in this way, right? In B2C, it's different. It's what happens is that a problem like, oh, I want to order food post midnight is a problem that almost everyone has, right? Then what if I'm up at 12? So there's a single USP, there's a single graphic, and you just spread and pray, spray and pray, right? B2B is more about precision and, toning it down as much as you can. Right? And outbound is as toned down as it can be. Like you're basically writing one email to one person, right?
Yeah.
And in comparison, a B2C is a graphic, a sponsored ad by Uber will perhaps run for 10 million people on Facebook, right? Yeah. Out of which 200,000 will end up clicking it because it resonates with them, right? The use cases are very similar for a lot of people in B2C. In B2B, the use cases are very different. And even if the use cases are broadly same, the nuances of the problem for each company and executive will be different. And hence, you need to be involved in the whole buyer journey from the very beginning till the end and post it, right? A B2C, a lot of times, once the transaction is done, you're done. Right? Like I delivered, you're happy with the food, you never order from Swiggy again. It's not really Swiggy's problem. It might affect their bottom line or top line, but it's not really a problem. In B2B, if you've sold a product and your customer stops talking to you or stop using your product to do what he was supposed to, you're like, what the hell? Right? Because there's something really, really wrong with your product. Right? Yeah. So we look at these things from different perspectives. As far as just general growth is concerned, is that first level, you need to figure out what is your market size, no matter what you're doing, be it B2C or B2B. Second, you're going to pick the battles that you're going to fight. Yeah. That, hey, I am going to be the best hair salon in Indiranagar. I don't want to be the one in the world, but I want to be the best hair salon in Indiranagar. Or say, I want to be the best chai wala in Doma. Right? So you pick a problem like that. Right? And that is true for both B2C as well as B2B in some ways, that you pick something that you're really, really going to solve, right? Now, the third step, which is common for both of them, is again, identify those personas, right? Who's going to buy? Yeah. Now you identify what channels do I use to reach out to these people, right? And of course, B2C has its own way, B2B has its own way. This is a more LinkedIn word. This is a more Instagram, Google Ads word, right? And one final element is that you want to be present at the moment of consideration. For example, if I'm going to buy something, I should be thinking of you, right? A lot of growth primarily comes from, can you capture some of people's imagination while they are considering to do something? And that something is what you do, right? If they're planning a trip, for example, if I'm planning to trip to Vietnam, a good company that has got its growth right will be able to show me the ad 2 days, 3 days before and after and so on, and have me consider them. Right? Yeah. I am planning to buy a CRM. I will look it up on Google. a good company that has got B2B growth sorted will start showing me ads. A fresh desk will do it, a Salesforce will do it, and so on. And the next steps of there will be someone from Freshworks will call me, right, and say like, hey, I could figure out, I could see you on LinkedIn putting a request on that, which a Salesforce might not, right? So that's where the growth stories are different, right, based on like what stage and the company you are in. And when it comes to B2C, I think again, growth at what cost? That's also an element. Do you want to just acquire customers for the heck of acquiring customers or investor decks and so on? Or does your unit economics really make sense? Right?
Okay.
It has to make sense for you to keep growing that business. To any time, to anything to be grow, it has to be sustainable. Right? It's basically, you could think of this as cell multiplication, right? If the cell is diseased and unhealthy, and no matter how many of those multiply, they're just primarily still going to be cancer, right? But if these are healthier cells, that's what growth is about, right? Muscle building and so on. So those healthier things is you have to identify that what is that one system that's working where all the stakeholders are involved. You as a provider, other people as consumers, and the other middlemen that kind of enable this, like maybe your payment provider or so on, or people who provide you real estate and stuff. So all the stakeholders are happy. This seems like a great thing happening right now here. We can scale it, right? We now can go and repeat the same model in 10 cities because we have a hypothesis that similar kind of customers exist there. So yeah.
Awesome. I think you have put every every step, every questions that I had in place with this answer. So yeah, I think even the questions that was asked during the, I just sent out a survey link just to grab their email ID and contact numbers of all the attendees. I also asked them what they would like to know about entrepreneurship in the session, and few of them also got those questions. I collated that as well. So I have this one question for you. I think the others have already gotten answered here. So one question is, what are the top channels that I should look for in 2020 to market? Which should be my top channels that I should look for in 2020?
So if you're B2C, I would say Instagram is still very big. Whereas I personally believe that the platform is still being underutilized or misutilized. I see a lot of ads and then I don't see a clear call of action and all that. I see people kind of underusing the stories feature and so on. Instagram is still one. TikTok is picking up, but I'm personally not really a big fan of the format. So I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But yeah, like as a B2C marketer, nothing is ever not a fair game. Do it. If your customers are there, do it. Be a TikTok star. Sell to as many people as you can. Influencer marketing, again, which is part of Instagram and TikTok, is something that you should still look out for. I think it's still early days for this, and micro-influencing is still as a concept coming up. Right? And as you'll realize, micro-influencing is as close to word of mouth as you can get. From a manufacturing perspective, if you can artificially manufacturing word of mouth, micro-influencing is as close as you get. So that's one thing that you should look at. When it comes to B2B, I think account-based marketing is the next big thing. It's absolutely the next big thing. You can do either one-to-all, where you cohort a bunch of companies in an industry and you reach out with a certain set of messaging and you do supporting LinkedIn ads, events and whatnot, depending on where your customers are. Or you do one-to-one. So for example, if I'm trying to sell to, say, I don't know, John Deere tractors, for example, right?
Okay.
So then I will, in that campaign, for example, if I had to think through this, right, I would try to find out that, hey, if I haven't worked with tractor companies, which are the transportation companies? If I work with a Mahindra, I'm going to use that case study. I'm going to show the similarities to their business model, how Mahindra uses it to achieve success in certain parts. What are the percentages there, like how the Salesforce efficiency has increased, or things like that. So I will try to make it as relevant to them and then have like periodic messaging reaching out to them every week and so on. And you make sure that it's never one channel. So a lot of times what people make mistake is that while they say they are doing ABM, they're only doing email marketing. just sending emails don't mean account-based marketing because you've been able to, put it in an Excel sheet and, divide 5 companies and all these contacts. But you got to do a lot of things. For example, now that you have the name and email IDs, it's very easy for you to run a remarketing ad, both on Google as well as on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can make a remarketing ad live in all the 3 places and you're losing nothing unless this person clicks. But what happens is this person is suddenly getting that brand recognition, right? And then the chances of him clicking your second or third email increases. So with time, it kind of improves, right? And with ABM also, again, another thing is, and I've spoken to a bunch of people in recent times trying to, set up the practice for Mobisy. So one general advice that, don't rush it. If you're looking to do a pilot for an account-based marketing, do it for at least 3 months. And the idea doing that for 3 months should be essentially to figure out your own playbook. Don't expect success from the very first day because these are always high purchase, high consideration decisions. So you want to be there in those business executives' consideration and eventually you'll get the deal.
Yeah.
So that's the B2B side of B2C.
The perspective is just to, wherever your customers are, you have to be there to, tell them what you're doing. So that definitely is an important. And next thing, to also monitor every channel, even if you're out there on every platform, it's important to monitor and, put some relevant metrics there so you can judge if this works out for me or it's not working out. So that's incredible. Okay. So I think all the other questions you've all actually answered through various other questions. So it's been a, an wonderful learning experience for me, learning from an entrepreneur like you, because I'm an inspiring entrepreneur. I want to, someday have a business of my own where it, more of a product-based business. So that's what I'm actually looking out for. And it was a great interaction that I had with you. I think a lot of questions that I had over the years, I think today I've got it cleared. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Ashwini. I mean, this is fun. I'm glad that I get to share my thoughts on a lot of these things. I would still, I hope I could answer all these questions. I will again put it out there. If somebody wants to talk about something in particular, I'm more than happy to, have a chat with them. They want to bounce an idea to start a company. They want to know maybe what possible incubator or VC funds they could apply to and what stages they are. More than happy to talk to people and connect them to other people, like a warm introduction or whatnot. Finally, I would still like to end this on another note which I personally feel that we don't talk enough about, is the mental health bit about entrepreneurs. Is that a lot of times I see that people find themselves alone and going through this struggle on their own, and they think that they have overpromised out there in the world and this failure is the end of the world, and they kind of go in a silo or a depression and all that. To all these people, I would say it doesn't matter, dude. Try again. You're gonna get it. And all of us basically can do is try, right? The reason perhaps I could share these thoughts with you, or if you think that I had some intelligent things to say, it primarily comes from is that I've fucked up a lot more than you guys have. If you think I know more than you, it's because I've gone out there and done a lot of wrong things in wrong ways and then kind of learned. So don't be shy from taking that leap of faith, going ahead and starting your business. And at the same time, very contradictory to the same thing is that don't rush it. There is no perfect age to do this. There's no, I am 21, at 28, I'll be married and, I'll have a wife, a son to take care of, or a husband and sasuma to kind of take care of. And that's why I won't be able to do it. It's not really the case. You'll find that historically, also, if you look at the data, actually majority of successful entrepreneurs are post 30. So if you haven't started your company yet and you're holding on to that idea and you're thinking you're not good enough, actually you're taking more time. And as someone used to say that sometimes to take like a big jump, you got to take few steps back. So perhaps it's that. And all the best. I'm sure all of you will do well. Again, if anybody wants to reach out, more than happy to have a conversation. All right, Ashwini, thanks a lot for doing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Your last sentence, kind of reminded me what Gary Vayner, told in a couple of his podcasts also. You just don't beat yourself up. You will turn out, find some other day. So you just have to keep that faith going on.
And that's why I avoid GAN, because I get compared with people like that. Anyway, so Take care, Ashwini. We'll stay in touch. Good, fun conversation.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Saurabh, for taking the time and effort to being a part of this learning community. I have learned a lot, and I definitely hope our audiences have also got to learn something new today. And always keep that spirit of entrepreneurship burning in their life. So on that note, I would like to sign off. But before that, Ampliz webinar 5 will be live next week, Tuesday at 4 p.m. again. Please do register for the event, and I'm sure that will also be as engaging, as fun and interactive as possible. I'll make sure that that happens to you guys. So thank you for joining us today, and we all hope that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful evening. See you guys.